Welcome back. This is part 3 of our Delphi Murder series. We already covered earlier the prosecution or the state side of the case and the fact that uh, they really believe that Richard Allen is the guy. And we went through why they believe that and what was presented at trial, and that there is a very good case with what was presented at trial, that it looks like Richard Allen is the culprit. He was certainly, the people in the jury believed that that was the case. They convicted him. He was sentenced to 130 years. And then in part 2, we talked about the defense's case, the fact that there was many things that were not allowed at trial. So that really changes up things when you look at the things that were kept out of the trial, and that about 2/3 of the case was not even able to be presented by the defense. So it's I don't know, where do you guys stand after all of that? I'll be interested to hear, for those of you that have commented. Once this is all released, I'll go back and look at the comments as they come in, and I'll respond to a bunch of that stuff. So likewise, comment on this one. We're going to go through a bunch of the theories around this case, and kind of dispel some things, and maybe present some more questions that have not been asked yet, or that maybe haven't been thought of quite yet. But so we're going to get into that. We'll talk about different theories, and then at the end, we'll talk about what the future is for this case, and if there is, if anything's going to happen, because that's kind of up in the air right now too. There's people out there saying that there will be no appeal, that it'll never happen, and then there are other people saying that there's no way it's not going to happen. So we'll talk about that a little bit and discuss the possibility of all of that stuff, and what may be part of that appeal if there is one. So, all right. So we'll start off with the timeline for the prosecution, and we'll talk about a bunch of the things that were brought up at trial to refute that. So the big thing is that it came out for the prosecution that they believe that Allen was out on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. Now that has to be their timeline. For anything else to be the case, for the girls to go down the hill at 2:14 p.m., for Richard Allen to be seen by Sarah Carbaugh at 3:57 p.m., he has to have been on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. That's it. If there was any way to determine that he was not on the trail, then Richard Allen is not the guy, right? Now, in 2017, Richard Allen says that he was on the trail from between 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. was his best guess. Well, that's right in the middle of the time period that they need him to be there. But in 2022, when he's interviewed again, he says that he was gone from the trail by 1:30 p.m. So he changes his story, he revises his timeline. If he was actually gone by 1:30 p.m. and he was at home with his wife or whatever, then there's no way that he was Bridge Guy. So, depending on what you believe about that, if Allen was there during the time or if he was already gone by the time the girls were kidnapped, really will determine whether you believe that Allen did it or not. So that is part of the prosecution's timeline. They believe that Allen was wearing a blue coat. The man that Betsy Blair described on the bridge, she said was wearing a blue coat at 2:13 p.m. Now it's interesting because, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, but the description that Betsy Blair gives of Bridge Guy is not the guy that we see in the video. The guy that we see in the video is much closer to Sarah Carbaugh's description of Bridge Guy. with the hat and the hair and possible facial hair. So there's an interesting discrepancy there, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, Sarah Carball originally stated in 2017 that the man she saw was wearing a tan coat and was just muddy. So in 2017, she never reported that he was muddy and bloody, and never said that he was wearing a blue coat. So there's a discrepancy there. You know, was it true? And now the thing that's really difficult is Sarah Carball, her testimony is the one that gets the search warrant to go into Richard Allen's house. So if that's the case, you know, when did this information get changed from blue to tan or from tan to blue? And what it seems to lean to is that Betsy Blair and Sarah Carball did not see the same guy. They have two completely different descriptions, two completely different colors of clothing that they were wearing. You know, one of them is clean shaven, the other one has facial hair. One of them is wearing a hat, the other one is not. So did they even see the same people? Now, of course, this also doesn't mean it wasn't Richard Allen, because he could have been part of this, right? It just means that they didn't see the same person. And maybe there was more than one person that was involved. So just stick that in your hat and think about it. Now, Allen's black Ford Focus, the prosecution says, was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 and 4 p.m. Right? That is their assertion. Now, Betsy Blair said that at 2:15 p.m., she only saw a 1965 non-black Comet parked in the old CPS lot, not a black Ford Focus. This is another problem for the defense or for the prosecution. Betsy Blair herself, who they got a lot of this testimony from and was very important to the case, said that Allen's car wasn't there. And she gave a whole story as to why she knew that the car was parked there was a Comet and it was a 1965, is because someone in her family had one. So she knew the car really well. Very different body style from a Ford Focus. She said that there was no Ford Focus in that parking lot when she went by at 2:15. So now, maybe it fits the timeline that Richard Allen wasn't there. If his car was parked at the old CPS building and he left at 1:30, like he said, or was gone by 1:30, his car wouldn't have been there. So how do you reconcile that? That one of the major witnesses from the prosecution says that his car wasn't there. So on February 12th, 2017, Betsy Blair provided a description of the man on the bridge. She said that the man on the bridge was a youthful, boyish-looking person in his 20s, maybe early 30s, with brown, poofy hair. This would become sketch number 2. It was not released to the public until April 22nd, 2019. Although her statement was taken 3 days after the girls were found. And Betsy Blair was 50 feet from Bridge Guy. So she would have seen him. She should have known or given a good description of Bridge Guy, or who we believed to be was Bridge Guy. But she saw somebody there that was out of place, that was in their 20s, maybe early 30s, young, with brown poofy hair. Certainly not Richard Allen, who she was seeing. So who is it that she saw? We don't know. We have no idea to this point. She was the closest person to seeing that. She also saw the girls that day when she was there. So how is it that that report and that sketch doesn't get released until April 22nd, 2019? Over 2 years after the murders happened. Did it just get lost? Why didn't they release that? And here's the thing. These sketches, not admissible at trial. Why? Why didn't they let those be seen? It's a huge problem because these are eyewitnesses that are testifying for the state, saying that they saw the person there, saying that it's consistent with what they believe to be the killer. But they don't even let their sketches in because those sketches don't look like Richard Allen. So now a lot of people say sketch number 1 does look like Richard Allen. And I could see that, that it's similar. But sketch number 2, the one from Betsy Blair, looks nothing like Richard Allen. Nothing at all. So even if you believe sketch number 1 by Sarah Carball is Richard Allen, there was somebody else there that day. Who is this other guy? Because it certainly wasn't Allen. So sketch number 1, the Carball sketch of the man walking down 300 North was taken on June 19th, 2017 and released on July 17th, 2017. That was 127 days after the event. And when Sarah Carball saw the person on the trail, she was driving in her car. So while she's watching the road, while she's doing whatever she's trying to do, as she's driving, she looks up and she sees a suspicious guy, and she's supposed to remember everything about what they look like. And again, remember that she never said initially that he was muddy and bloody, just that he was muddy. It wouldn't come out until the trial that she says muddy and bloody. So what did she truly remember then in June 19th versus what she remembered at the trial when she mentions all of these other things? So Sarah Carball saw this man walking towards the CPS building at 3:57 p.m. So this is where the state gets their timeline, that they believe that, you know, he would have to have been out there up until about 4 o'clock for it to really be Richard Allen, that he'd have to be out on the trail from between 1 and 4. So that's their basic timeline. Now, I want to go over this single person theory first, because even if you believe Richard Allen did it and you believe he did it alone, there's a lot of issues with this idea of it just being one person, right? I will give you the trigger warning now. We're going to talk about some more of the difficult things at the crime scene in this section. So if that is something you are sensitive to, you may want to fast forward a little bit, because I'm going to have to talk about some of those things here because it's important in the aspect of understanding if this could be one person or not. So if it is just one person, Allen, if you believe it is Richard Allen or whoever else it could be, they would have to control both of the teenage girls by themselves. It's a huge issue. Not saying that one of the girls would run off and leave the other one, but you would think that one of them would try to get away or distract him in some way so the other one could run off and then they could escape, or they could run off and get somebody and bring them back, right? Now, it is also proven that there were no ligature marks, no tape residue on either of the bodies. So there is nothing to suggest that they were restrained. So that's a huge problem. Like, How does this one guy, now, mind you, Richard Allen is 5'4" and 180 pounds. He's not a big guy. He's not this hulking dude that is going to be able to command this control of these two teenage girls. And so, even though, we believe that he had a gun, and so they may have been afraid for that, but he kept them basically immobilized while all of this was going on. Nobody in the area who was there as a witness heard any screaming or any struggling. I've already mentioned that before. I've been there, and in the winter when there's no leaves on the trees and all the foliage is on the ground, if anybody's struggling or anybody's doing anything out there, you're going to hear it for a good distance, especially if somebody's screaming out. It's not going to be silent in the forest, right? So, but nobody heard anything. Not Brad Weber, who was supposed to be at home, who may have been at home. His van may have been there. Not Betsy Blair. Not, any of the other witnesses that stumbled upon the scene. This photographer didn't hear anything, right? So, that's an issue for this whole single person thing, because there would have been noise. There would have been things. If neither of the kids were restrained, it was also proven that neither of the girls tested positive for any drugs in their system. So they weren't drugged at the time of the murders. So how do you account for the fact that he had to murder them one at a time? And if one of them wasn't, restrained in some way, how in the world did he do it? Now, also, there are problems with the blood patterns there. Uh, we know that Abby had no real blood on her, nothing on her hands, nothing on her body except for the wound at her neck. How did that happen? There's talk. Did he wash the body? Because, of course, we know that Libby was naked when they found her. Uh, Abby was wearing her clothing. How did that happen? You know, was she forced to watch while he did it to one person and then like disrobe and put on these clothes? Like, but there's no blood on the clothing. Did he wash the bodies or at least the one? And is there time for all of that? Because all of this would have had to have happened, between 2:32 and about 3:30, right? So less than an hour to do all these things, and to make sure that he was out of there, right? So how do you account for all of that stuff if it's just one person? Is that enough time? I don't know. I've not been in that situation, so uh, and I can't imagine this guy wouldn't be terrified, out of his mind when he's doing this, and to be afraid. So it seems hard to understand how this timeline of a single person could actually happen. So I have questions about that. Now, Abby only weighed about 100 pounds, like 95, I think was what they said. So she was tiny. Now, because she didn't have any like obvious blood pooling, blood soaking through her clothes, there is a theory that she was strung up and upside down when a lot of that happened. Now, again, there's no ligature marks, which would need to be there if you're going to hang somebody up by their ankles, right? Uh, but like, how do you get the blood to go the opposite way if they're not hung upside down or thrown over somebody's shoulder or something? There was belief that the bodies were dragged, but when you look at the crime scene photos, there's no obvious drag marks anywhere. So, there's a lot of questions here if it was just one person because they would have to do all of this by themselves. Now, Libby was over 200 pounds, right? Or at least close to 200 pounds. Now, the question is 5'4", 180-pound Richard Allen Is he going to be able to throw that girl over his shoulder and carry her somewhere? Right? If there's no drag marks to position the bodies, because the bodies were then positioned and put in place. And, whether you believe the sticks were put on them to cover them up, or if they were actually runes placed on top of the bodies, which we'll get into here in a minute, uh, how do you account for that? So I think there are a lot of questions as to this being a single person. And so, if, even if you believe that it's Richard Allen that did the crime, I feel like there's no possible way that he could have done it alone. He would have needed other people there. He would have needed somebody to make sure that the girls weren't running off to go somewhere. He would have needed help setting up the scene, as it was very much staged, a whole bunch of things there. And how do you lay that just on one person? I don't know. It's a big question in my mind, whether you believe the Odinism stuff or not, whether you believe it was Allen or not. Doesn't matter. I can't see any way that this one person could kill both of these girls in the time frame that he did and leave the crime scene the way that he did and do what he did to the bodies. Like, it seems really, really hard to do that in less than an hour and get out of there. So those are my thoughts on the single person theory. I think that it is almost without a doubt there needs to be more people involved. Let's see. Okay. So this next part, like I said, I went back and I looked at the memorandum, the 136 pages. I went through that and pulled a lot of this directly from that. So again, go back and read it yourself. It's easily available online. And I think it's important that you do read it because it is exhaustive and it is really, really telling on the information that the defense had gotten from the discovery. And I think it's important to understand that the discovery is what the state gives to the defense so that they can then begin their investigation. It is supposed to be all of the evidence that they have already procured so that the state can now, or the defense can now go look at it, form their own conclusions, and go through their whole process, right? So in that, you have a 27-page report written by 3 members of the FBI task force that was submitted on May 2nd, 2021. This report was in the discovery given to the defense for their investigation of the charges against Rick Allen. So here's the thing. A lot of people believed that when this Odinism theory came out, that it was just the defense coming up with a bunch of bullshit to muddle the waters in the case. That is not true at all. Where the defense got this idea from is directly from the FBI task force. The FBI was investigating this, or at least the task force that the FBI put together was investigating this, was looking at this Odinism aspect. They wrote a report about it. This was not something made up by the defense. This was something given to the defense that they found in the thousands of pieces of paperwork that they were given, and they found it in there, and they realized that there was something to it. And so they began investigating this. And there is some crazy stuff around this. The 3 people that wrote the report were all Terre Haute police officers. Greg Ferenczi, Todd Click, and Kevin Murphy. Now, Greg Ferenczi, like I mentioned at the end of the last episode, was killed 5 days after the report was submitted. A Molotov cocktail was thrown through his office window. When he exited the building, Shane Meehan shot him in the head. Meehan is currently in a mental hospital. He was arrested but is not able to stand trial because they are saying that he is not competent. Now, Todd Click was arrested 11 days before the beginning of the Delphi trial. He was charged with unrelated crimes, including forgery, official misconduct, and obstruction of a child abuse assessment. So Todd Click was working within CPS at that point, not working at the police department anymore. This is 7 years after the initial crimes, and several years after they had done this investigation and were investigating it. So Todd Click is working on other things and is arrested because of this. Oddly, just before the trial starts, he's arrested. So 2 out of the 3 people that wrote the report completely out of the picture. Now, Kevin Murphy, who testified that other investigators, that almost all of the investigators believed that the crimes were committed by 2 to 6 people, is strangely silent after all of this happens. I tried to look up some things about Kevin Murphy and couldn't find anything. Matter of fact, I sent a message to Bob Mata because I'm curious to see what the backstory is on Kevin Murphy, because after the report is submitted, I see 0 about Kevin Murphy. So I don't know if he just saw the writing on the wall and decided, Greg's dead, Todd's in jail, I think I better keep my mouth shut and not say anything more. I don't know if that's the case, or maybe I just didn't see any reports. But Kevin Murphy is kind of MIA out there somewhere doing something. But so the FBI task force in 2018 identified a possible connection to Odinism and ritual killings. Kevin Murphy, again, would testify that investigators believed that the crimes were committed by 2 to 6 persons. So here is some of the evidence that they found from those things. And I will get into the specific people here in a second and go through some of the things that were pointed out in the memorandum. But here's some basic stuff. Elvis Fields' sister informed the task force that her brother knew information regarding the crime scene, and he admitted to killing the girls. Elvis Fields would deny killing the girls when he was interviewed, but asked investigators if he would get in trouble if his spit was found on the girls. That's real weird, man. Like, really strange to say that. Like, hey, I didn't do it. I wasn't there. But if you found my spit on one of the girls, I might have an excuse for it. What excuse? Like, I don't understand. And how is this guy not like immediately brought in? Like, holy shit, he confessed and he says he spit on one of the girls. We might find it, but is ultimately cleared. Crazy. Brad Holder shared a Facebook post showing Odinism symbols and mimicking the crime scene. We'll talk more about that. Amber Holder, Brad's ex-wife, testifies that Patrick Westfall confessed to killing Abby. She admitted that she was told by her ex-husband, who was drinking at the time. The positions of the bodies resemble Odinite imagery. Branches laid on the bodies were identified as runes relating to Odinism by a Purdue professor. Now, this name, oddly enough, is lost to the investigation. Nobody knows who this Purdue professor is that identified them as runes. But at trial, Dawn Perlmutter testified to this for the defense. Brad Olahy would testify for the state, saying the branches were used to cover the bodies. If you look at the branches, right, that were used on the bodies, there's a lot of weird stuff, right? They're obviously put on the bodies in patterns, right? Typically, if you're covering up bodies, maybe you throw, and this is at winter time, right? This is in winter. You throw a bunch of leaves, you throw a bunch of sticks and stuff on top of there so it looks like you're covering it. You don't lay 4 or 5 or 6 branches on somebody in a pattern and say that you're covering a body. I don't buy it. Uh, seeing some of the mock-ups that people had at the jail of the crime scene and the way that the sticks were on the bodies, it seems like there was a reason, a purpose for them placing those sticks. It wasn't to cover up the body. There wasn't enough, and they didn't really cover anything, right? Just a weird thing to do if it's not some kind of strange ritual, right? So, and some of those branches I think is really interesting that some of the branches were cut, right? This is another issue within this whole case is if these branches were cut, how did Alan have time to saw through branches while he was there doing everything else? Right? Again, it points towards the fact that there was more than one person, or did he bring them with him? Now, that's a possibility. Maybe he brought them with him because he had some kind of purpose. Now, one of the people, they would find videos later on their Facebook pages, one of the people that they believe is involved in this, cutting branches for a ritual. And they look very consistent with the branches that were found at the crime scene. So, just another, is it a coincidence? Is it something that they did regularly? I don't know. The blood on the tree that they believe Libby was killed at was identified as a rune or marking representing Odin. Now, the state would say that it was blood transfer, possibly from her hand. But there was what looked to be like an F painted on the tree in Libby's blood. Now, was that just transfer where she touched herself and reached for the tree and put that there? It's possible, I guess, but it seems like from what people were saying that were there that saw the photos, it looks like it's painted on the tree. So, seems highly likely that it was not blood transfer, but that's what the prosecution said. Now, the first person that, very interestingly enough, is implicated in this Odinism thing is Brad Holder. So I was going to put up some pictures and then I decided not to. Brad Holder looks a lot like the Sarah Carball sketch with the hat. He has several hats that he's wearing in many pictures that look very similar to the hat that she described. At one point, he did have a goatee. I've seen people posting that during the time of the murders, he had a big bushy beard, but none of that was ever confirmed. Right? I saw people posting that he had posted that during the time, but like I could post a photo of me 5 years ago and it posts today. Right? I could do that on Facebook. It doesn't mean that that's when the photo was taken. So there's no real timestamps that we know of exactly what Brad Holder looked like the week of the murders, right? I don't know what that looks like. I know that there are several photos that are out there that he looks very consistent with the bridge guy sketch. So, I don't know, but here's another thing that is a big deal to me anyway. When you look into these cases, you always start out with people that may have had some kind of motivation to do this, right? Or may have been, have some kind of connection to the people. We know that Alan had no connection with them at all. He may have seen them in CVS at some point. They may have walked in there to get something. It's not a big town. So he may have talked to them then, but he had no other real connection to the girls. However, Brad Holder's son, Logan, was dating Abby at the time of the murders. Like, to me, that's a big link. And it seems like that needs to be a guy that's investigated and really looked into. Now, his social media just after the murders seemed to be taunting the police and pointed to his involvement. There were several, uh, and we'll talk about it here in just a second, but there were lots of posts of comments about, friends will help you bury the body and all of this stuff, and there were paintings and stuff that he posted during this time of things that were consistent with stuff that they may find at the crime scene. There was another one that was almost like, well, I'll describe it here in a second. Um, so Jerry Holman says that Brad Holder was never really considered a suspect, and that he was cleared on March 16th, 2017. So a month after the murders, a little bit more than a month and 2 days, this guy is immediately cleared. Now, one of the reasons why he was cleared is Brad Holder did have an alibi. It was believed, or he said, that he was at work while this was all happening. Now, he did clock in that day, but he could have had somebody clock him in. There's all kinds of theories to how this was possible. There was nobody that could actually testify and say that they saw him at work that day during these hours or whatever. So there was none of that. So maybe he was there, maybe he wasn't. But that was the alibi that he had. So one of his Facebook posts showed a picture of two women lying in a forest, dead or playing dead, tree limbs arranged on their body, and posed in similar ways to Abby and Libby. The runes on the bodies were different than the ones that were actually at the crime scene, but they were all consistent with Odinism. And this is reported on April 12th, 2017, right? 2 months, almost to the day of the murders. Now, the crime scene and discussions about the crime scene were not released until the trial, right? So how does Brad Holder know anything about the crime scene? How does he post a picture that is consistent with the crime scene before any of that is ever released to the public? It's a real question, man. So now Unified Command had requested to re-interview Brad Holder, but for whatever reason, they never followed through. So he was only interviewed once. And interestingly enough, that interview has been lost or recorded over or gone. So we don't even have that evidence that you might need to really look at the possibility that he's a suspect. So another one named in the memorandum was Elvis Fields. Now, Elvis Fields confessed to his sister Mary on February 14th, 2017, the day that the bodies were found, that he was present at the crime scene and gave her details. Now, later on, Elvis's sister would end up taking a polygraph, and she would pass her polygraph. Now, in 2017, when Elvis was interviewed, he denied any involvement. Of course he would. Like, who goes in there and says it? Yeah, I did it. No. So he denies his involvement, but he admits to another one of his sisters, Joyce, that he had spit on one of the girls. And then he asked the police if they found it, if he would be in trouble. He admitted that he formed the horns in Abby's hair because she was a troublemaker. Now, this is something that they didn't even know until trial, right? Until the photos of the bodies were released. Now, how is this not ringing alarm bells in these investigators' minds that this guy is out there openly admitting that he put sticks in her hair to look like horns because they all thought that she was a troublemaker? They would know, right? She was dating Brad Holder's son. So they were around. They knew who she was, and apparently they didn't like her for whatever reason. And this guy says that he put the sticks in her hair to look like horns. It's crazy. He also told Joyce that he was on on a trail and a bridge with two girls that were killed, and he was going to go to jail for a long time. Now, he did have an alibi, but his alibi was given by his roommate, Rod Abrams, who said that Elvis, Ned Smith, and himself were in Muncie, Indiana, visiting a sick friend the day of the murders. The problem is that story conflicted with what Elvis actually told the police about his whereabouts. It was not the same. So, is it really a good alibi? Doesn't seem like it, right? All right. Moving on to Patrick Westfall. It's another one. Now, Patrick Westfall lived in Delphi. He lived pretty close to the crime scene in February, specifically on February 13th, 2017. At the time, him and Brad Holder were close friends. But oddly, that would change in February of 2017. But up to that point, Brad Holder spent nearly every weekend there in Delphi with Patrick Westfall, hanging out at his house. So later on, they would find out that the fallout resulted from a fight while performing a ritual in the woods in February of 2017. Now, obviously, this is only speculation, but if that was the case, could this be the murder that they had a falling out around? Now, Holder would share with his ex-wife that an argument happened at a river near Patrick Westfall's house. Brad Holder would tell his ex-wife that Westfall was responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. He stated that the killings were done because one of the mothers were mixing with people outside their race. He also mentioned that Westfall and he had powerful friends. So, this is something, we're always looking for motive. Who has a motive to kill these people? What would Richard Allen's motive have been? If he was the one, other than some weird sexual desire because we believe that he was going to try to rape the girls. Even though that was kind of where they tried to lead that, then his family comes on and says that he never once molested any one of them. So could that be true or not? I don't know. It seems like there's a whole lot better case for some crazy racist people in the woods performing these rituals and stuff that may have beef with his son's girlfriend and their family. I don't know. It seems like an easier motive for me to swallow than some random guy that decides, oh, there's two girls on the trail. Even though, that happens every day too. So, maybe it's not out of the realm of possibilities. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. So Patrick Westfall's alibi for the day of the murders was simply that he was at home that day. Not much of an alibi at all. But, the next person that is involved in that is a guy named Johnny Messer. Now, Johnny Messer was never investigated at all. They never talked to him. But Johnny Messer was a recruiter for the Odinites who connected the Odinites from Rushville, which was Brad Holder, Elvis Fields, and Rod Abrams, and connected them to the guys in Delphi, which became Patrick Westfall. So Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, told police that John and Patrick were like brothers. Johnny borrowed her car around February 13th, 2017, and returned with dried blood on the side of it. He never explained it, and it took several washes to remove the blood. She also claimed that Brad Holder and Johnny Messer were the most violent people she knew. She believed the murders were a blood in and blood out ritual into a gang. So Messer would deny ever being to Westfall's home in Delphi, right? Denied he was ever there. But these are the guys that the FBI task force believed were directly involved in these crimes, were directly part of this Odinite or Odinism cult there in the area. And so they were really looking at them and trying to investigate the possibility that they were the guys, that they did it. So that is the Odinite theory. It's not all of the Odinite theory, obviously. There's more to it. And it goes into the prison guards that were there guarding Richard Allen. So in prison in Westfall, specifically, Richard Allen was monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by COs that are members of an Odinite cult. This comes directly from the 136-page memorandum, right? So it's interesting if this is the case, what they could have done. And I'll discuss that here in a minute. Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones both wore patches on their DOC uniform proclaiming "In Odin We Trust," and another patch displaying symbols of Odinism. Both displayed runes on their Facebook pages. Sergeant Robinson openly displayed his Odinite altar on his Facebook page, consistent with Brad Holder's altar on his Facebook page. Now, the patches were on display when the defense team visited Allen on April 3rd, 2023, and those patches were removed after August 17th, 2023. Now, why? Why did that happen? How did that change? Now, I worked in DOC, right? I was a corrections officer for a little bit, and I know that they don't allow you to put shit on your uniform, right? You can't have any like identifying marks. Not a good thing, right? They try to stop that. Now, how is it that these guys were wearing patches on their uniforms? Seems strange. And they were both sergeants, so they were higher up than your typical corrections officer. So it's crazy. But the defense revealed to Jerry Holman in their August 10th, 2023 deposition that they had strong links to Odinism and they would be revealing names at trial. Now, they did not reveal that they knew that the guards at that time were Odinites. They didn't reveal that to Holman. But it seems that Holman let them know and said, hey, you got to cut that shit out. You got to take off those patches because they know. And all of a sudden, now the patches are removed. Now, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were present at every single meeting of the defense team at Allen. They would record it on camcorder, which is not supposed to happen because the defense and the defendant are supposed to be privileged information. They're not supposed to record that in the DOC. They can record just about anything else, but they can't record that. Like your personal conversations with your legal counsel are not supposed to be recorded. These guys didn't give a shit. They were recording it anyway. And as they were recording it, they would make sure that they turned the chair so they could face that camera directly to Allen's face. So there is no way that he could mouth anything to the defense team saying, hey, this is what's going on. Now, what happened in a lot of those meetings is that he would repeatedly ask about his wife and his kids. So Allen would be unable to privately discuss anything to the defense team. Now, the defense never discussed Odinism to Allen. Hold on a second. There we go. Except for one visit, right? The only time it was discussed was one visit when Allen mumbled to them about the Odinites threatening him, which is interesting, right? Now, on May 4th, 2023, may the force be with you, the defense team visited Allen in Westville. He repeatedly asked if his wife and kids were okay. He mentioned that they were going to kill him. When asked who, he stated the guys with the Odin patches, right? This is crazy. So now you've got these prison guards that may be sitting there saying things to Alan like, hey, if you don't do exactly what we tell you, if you don't confess, if you don't say what we're telling you to say, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill your wife. We're going to kill your kids. Right? This is crazy that this is possible, but there is evidence that this actually happened. Now, what's even crazier than that is none of this was admissible at trial. Right? There might be a bunch of you out here that are listening that have never heard any of this information, right? Because you didn't watch anything from the defense, you didn't watch any, or you didn't pay attention to any of the memorandums that were going through. Maybe you didn't see that. Maybe you just thought it was all bullshit, what the defense was bringing up about this Odinism angle, because it got blown up in the media, and they all said that it was just ridiculous and that it was a crazy theory. But this is actual stuff that they have evidence for. Like, there are actual receipts for this stuff. It's crazy. And then it's not admissible at the trial, which clearly influenced the jury, right? Because I think that anybody that heard some of this testimony, and if they would have been able to bring in Brad Holder or Elvis Fields and all that, there may have been a very, very different outcome of the trial. I think it's highly possible that Alan would not have been convicted if they had this information, if there was the ability to be able to discuss this. I don't know how you go through the 136-page memorandum and say that there is not enough evidence to present it. There's so much evidence there. It's unbelievable to me. Maybe, I'm not as versed at looking at these documents and stuff. But to me, it seemed like there was a lot of evidence there, not evidence that they came up with, out of thin air, but evidence that they had because the state provided that in the discovery. Now, when you go and you look again with Richard Allen being in prison, this idea of him, giving away these details of the crimes, right? What you don't understand about that, or what maybe you haven't heard, is that when they played the videos of Allen like eating his own feces, of shoving things down the toilet, a bunch of the stuff that he was shoving down the toilet was the discovery that he had gotten early on before he started making all these confessions, because in the 2022 interviews that Richard Allen had, he completely denied it. He said that he was not there. He did not do it. Over and over again, he said it wasn't him. And then he spends a little time in solitary. He realizes there's going to be a court case. The defense brings him the discovery so that he can go through it and he can see exactly what they're saying about him. Then he starts confessing. But he starts confessing things that were in the discovery. So this is not new information to Allen, right? This is information that he's reading. He's also losing his mind at this time and like freaking out because he's potentially going to spend the rest of his life in prison. He already has issues with depression. He has a attachment disorder. So like he's away from his family. He's away from anybody else. All he has is these guards that are staring at him, saying that if he doesn't admit to this, that they're going to kill his family, right? There's a lot of crazy shit that's happening here that is pushing this guy over the edge. And now we have all of this information that was not in the trial of other people that confessed to committing the crime. And these people were cleared. And there wasn't a real investigation done other than the three guys on the FBI task force looking at it, who are now all discredited, right? One of them is dead. the other one is in prison, and the third one is missing in action somewhere. It's crazy to think about that all of this could happen, even if you believe that Richard Allen is guilty, that these things were not discussed at trial, that these things were not put out there so the jury could get a full picture of what happened in these murders. Now, I understand wanting to give closure to the family and try to get somebody and just to, close this case and give that family some relief in knowing that they got the guy. I get it. But to do that, you got to get the guy. And even if they did get one of the guys, I don't think that it's finished, right? Now, let me give you some stuff about old Richard Allen here, about some of his ties to the crime. Now, there was no DNA found at the crime scene or at Richard Allen's house, right? There was no DNA found, nothing that would link him to the girls, nothing that would link him to the crime scene. Nothing was found at his house tying him to the crime except for the gun, which is disputed if it is even the gun used, and that there was a bullet that was consistent with the bullet that was found in between the bodies in a keepsake box. That one gives me some questions why that was in there, but who knows? I don't know why. None of his phone data, his computer, or any of his electronic data linked him to anything dealing with the crimes. He didn't know the girls. He wasn't like searching like, hey, how do I kill two people in the woods? How do I dispose of bodies? Like, he wasn't Googling any of that stuff, which we do see in a lot of these crimes that are planned out. Richard Allen has no connection to Odinism or any one of the suspects, right? He has no connection to any of that stuff. So now, of course, if you don't believe that it was linked to Odinism at all, it wouldn't make any difference. But he has no connection to Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, none of those people. He has no connections to them, who obviously said some things that connected them to the crime and also gave away key elements of the crime scene. Now, the one thing that I will say that is a little bit suspect is the white van, and the fact that Richard Allen admits to the white van. Now, that is where the defense says that Monica Walla, Dr. Monica Walla, was feeding him information. It's the only way that he could have known that without being the guy, right? That he would have had to have heard it from somebody else that was following the case and hearing the trial, and she's the only one that had access to him and had a vested interest in that. So, also, there is no fingerprint evidence at all that links Richard Allen to this crime. The Bridge Guy video doesn't show him wearing any gloves. So, there's no fingerprints at all. He had to use his hands, right? Of course, they didn't actually find the murder weapon. So, there's a lot of questions regarding this case. And I think, like I said, everybody needs to look at the totality of the case and see all the different sides of it. Do I necessarily think that it was a pagan ritual that was done out in the woods? I don't know. I think more than likely, I know a lot of people that are Satanist and stuff and play around with Satanism that do rituals and things like that, but they aren't real, like, dyed-in-the-wool Satanist, right? They're just playing at it. The same thing, you see people go through phases and they're Wiccan and all of these things, and they play with all of these different ideas. I think these guys, if they did do it, I think that they may have done that because they thought that it was some kind of ritual. Do I think that they are, like that was the goal. I don't know about that. I think that some of the statements that they made about the racism and stuff like that could be perfectly valid. Not maybe I don't want to say it that way, but it could be plausible that they would do it for that reason. Uh, you know, people that lean that way can be pretty volatile, and some of the people around them said exactly that. So, for me, the jury is still out. I don't know if Alan was involved or not, but I do not believe that he did it alone if he did do it. I believe that it had to be more than one person, and I believe that the police believed that up until they realized that they could close this case. So, if that is the case, there are more people out there. Now, whether it is Brad Holder, Elvis Fields, any of those guys, that remains to be seen. But I think it should be looked at. Now, with all of that being said, and with all of this information, do I believe that the defense has the ability to go to appeal? Hell yeah, I believe that they have plenty of information that they can go to, new information that was not presented at this trial that they can use to go and really open this whole can of worms and really look at it. And I think it should happen. I think that they should be able to get this in front of a judge and get this in front of a jury to look at this evidence that was not admissible in the original court case so that they can really determine who did this and if there is reason that they need to look elsewhere rather than keeping somebody in prison for 130 years and they may not have actually had any connection to this. So I don't know. You guys have heard all three sides of it, a little bit more into the theories in this one. But let me know. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if any of this changed your idea or gave you more insight into the case itself and maybe made you dig deeper. Because here's the thing. Everything that I do, whether it's Beyond the Headlines, my book series, the podcast, any of it, what I want for you is for you to dig deeper into these things, right? I am not the authority. I am just one guy that is looking at all this information, trying to figure it out and forming my own opinions, right? You are a person out there that has to look at this, decide what you believe, and form your own opinions, right? And I think it's really, really important for us to look at it like that. There's so much stuff out there right now. There are so many talking heads that are talking that this is the facts and blah, 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 and this and this. You know what? The only person's opinion that matters is yours. So go and research it, figure it out, see what you think, and make a decision for yourself. Because it's important that you know what you believe and that you can argue it and that you can have positive discord with other people in discussing these things. I think it's vitally important if you want to be in the true crime. So don't take my word for it. Go out there and seek out other people. See what you think is the truth, because that's what I'm doing all the time. So go and subscribe, like it, comment below. Let me know what you guys think about this whole series. Hopefully you have some time to binge it all, maybe in one day, which is always cool. And comment on all of it, because I want to know your guys' opinion. Let me know if you want me to do more of these deep dives into some of these cases. Let me know if there are other cases that you want me to look at. But our goal is always to get you thinking and to get you digging in deeper into all of this information. That's it. Just dig in and try to figure things out and develop your own opinions. Don't take anybody else's word for it. All right, guys. I will see you soon. See you on the next episode of True Crime, Myths, Legends, and More. Thank you guys for joining us for this, I don't know, probably close to 5 hours, 4.5 or something hours of me talking, which is not usually just me talking. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know. I will talk to y'all soon.